In the quiet village of Umuakwe, Tommy, a young bride, struggles to conceive despite numerous pregnancies. Each time she falls pregnant, tragedy strikes. Her unborn child mysteriously vanishes. Desperation leads her to a shocking discovery: her mother-in-law, Mama Nwako, is behind the horror. A neighbor, awake in the dead of night, witnesses the old woman performing dark rituals to steal the unborn child's soul. What follows is a battle between light and darkness, love and betrayal, as Tommy fights to reclaim her life from the clutches of a powerful witch. Tommy sat on the wooden stool outside her mud house, staring into the distance. The scent of burning firewood filled the air as women bustled about, preparing the evening meal. It had been 4 years since she married Nwako, yet she had no child to show for it. Every time she conceived, she would wake up bleeding. Her womb emptied as if she had never been pregnant. The villagers whispered behind her back, some calling her barren, others suggesting she had offended the gods. But Tommy knew something was wrong, something beyond natural explanation. Her mother-in-law, Mama Nwako, always seemed indifferent to her loss, offering hollow words of comfort while urging her son to take another wife. A man must have heirs, the old woman would say, her wrinkled face betraying no emotion. Yet, in her eyes, Tommy sometimes caught a flicker of something else, something dark and knowing. It sent shivers down her spine, but she dared not voice her suspicions. Not yet. A cool breeze rustled the plantain leaves as Chibuzo, Tommy's neighbor, stirred in her sleep. A strange noise had awakened her, a whispering chant carried by the wind. Rubbing her sleepy eyes, she peered through the cracks of her bamboo window and froze. In the dim moonlight, she saw Mama Nwako, draped in a black wrapper, moving toward Tommy's hut. In her hands, she clutched a small calabash, and her lips moved rapidly, whispering in a language Chibuzo did not understand. Chibuzo's heart pounded. She had always suspected the old woman of dabbling in dark forces, but never had she seen it with her own eyes. As Mama Nwako reached the doorstep, she bent low and traced strange symbols on the ground with a white powder. Then, with a deep, guttural breath, she began to hum, her voice resonating unnaturally through the air. The air thickened, the night growing eerily still. Chibuzo wanted to scream, but fear locked her throat. She watched in horror as Mama Nwako placed her hand against the mud wall and disappeared, walking straight through as if the solid structure were mere mist. Tommy jolted awake with a scream, drenched in sweat. A sharp pain tore through her abdomen, and an unbearable sense of emptiness filled her soul. She knew. She did not need a midwife to confirm it. Her unborn child was gone. Again. Hot tears rolled down her cheeks as she clutched her stomach, her sobs muffled by the thick darkness surrounding her. Nwako, her husband, stirred beside her, groaning in irritation. Not again, he muttered, rubbing his face in frustration. Why does this keep happening, Tommy? She turned to him with bloodshot eyes. I don't know, Nwako. But something is not right. This is not ordinary. But he would not listen. He never did. Instead, he buried his face in his hands and sighed. Maybe my mother is right, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Maybe I should take another wife. Tommy's heart clenched. The pain of losing another child was unbearable. But the thought of losing her husband's love shattered her completely. She knew she had to find answers, before it was too late. At dawn, Chibuzo sat outside her hut, her hands trembling around a wooden cup of steaming pap. She had seen things last night that no human should witness. She needed to tell Tommy, but fear weighed heavily on her. What if Mama Nwako found out? What if the witch silenced her forever? The sound of footsteps broke her thoughts. Tommy was approaching, her eyes sunken with exhaustion and sorrow. Chibuzo swallowed hard. She could not remain silent. Tommy, she whispered urgently, grabbing her hand. You must listen to me carefully. What is happening to you? It is not natural. I saw Mama Nwako last night, in the dead of night. She came to your hut, performing rituals. She walked through your wall, as if it were air. Tommy's breath hitched. Her worst fears were confirmed. Are you sure? She asked, gripping Chibuzo's hands tightly. Chibuzo nodded. You are in danger. She is stealing your children before they are even born. A cold wave of horror washed over Tommy. Her mother-in-law, her husband's own mother, was the one behind her suffering. But why? What did she stand to gain? One thing was certain, she could not remain silent any longer. Tommy wasted no time. She sought out Dibia Okonkwo, the oldest and most powerful seer in Umuokwe. His shrine. A small hut surrounded by cowrie-adorned calabashes and burning incense. Emitted an eerie aura of wisdom and mystery. The old man listened carefully as Tommy and Chibuzo recounted the events of the past night. His wrinkled face darkened with concern, and he nodded slowly. You have been cursed, he said, his voice deep and grave. Mama Nwako is no ordinary woman. She has been offering your unborn children to dark forces in exchange for power and longevity. This is not the first time she has done this. Tommy's skin prickled. What do I do? How do I stop her? The old man leaned forward. You must catch her in the act. A witch exposed is a witch weakened. But be warned, she will not go down without a fight. She will come for you, Tommy. Be prepared. Tommy swallowed hard. Fear gnawed at her, but anger burned stronger. If her mother-in-law thought she would remain silent and allow this wickedness to continue, she was wrong. It was time to fight back. Tommy and Chibuzo devised a plan. That night, Tommy would pretend to be asleep while Chibuzo stayed awake, watching from the safety of her hut. If Mama Nwako returned, they would be ready. As darkness fell, Tommy lay on her mat, every muscle in her body tense. The room was eerily quiet, save for the occasional hoot of an owl. She could feel the weight of unseen eyes on her. And then, just past midnight, it happened. A faint rustling outside, followed by a whisper, low, ancient, and malevolent. The room grew colder, and a heavy presence filled the air. Tommy forced herself to remain still, though her heart pounded like a drum. The bamboo door creaked open. And in the dim glow of the dying lantern, she saw her. Mama Nwako, her eyes gleaming unnaturally, stepped into the room, carrying the same calabash Chibuzo had seen. Chibuzo, watching from her window, clenched her fists. It was time. Just as Mama Nwako raised her calabash, whispering her dark incantations, Tommy sprang up, grabbing a bowl of blessed water given to her by Dibia Okonkwo. With all her strength, she flung it at her mother-in-law. A deafening scream tore through the air as the liquid sizzled against Mama Nwako's skin. Her form twisted unnaturally, shifting between human and something monstrous. Her eyes glowed red, and she let out a guttural growl. You dare challenge me? She hissed, her voice layered with a chilling echo. Nwako knelt before his mother, his face a mask of agony. Mama, tell me they are lying, he begged. Tell me you did not take my children. Mama Nwako's lips curled into a twisted smile. And if I did? Would you stop me, my son? Nwako staggered back, shaking his head. Why? Why would you do this? She sighed, her voice void of remorse. Power, my son. Longevity. Do you think I would watch myself wither and die when the spirits offered me another way? Tommy stepped forward, her rage boiling over. You call yourself a mother? You killed your own grandchildren. Mama Nwako scoffed. You were never worthy to bear my son's children. Your womb was merely a vessel for my offerings. Nwako's fists clenched. I stood by you, defended you. And all this time, you were killing my own blood. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Mama Nwako's face. She had never imagined her son would turn against her. Nwako, I did this for us. For our lineage to remain strong. But Nwako was done listening. He turned to the village chief. Do what must be done. The village gathered at the village square, where a large bonfire crackled in the center. Mama Nwako, bound and seated on the ground, remained silent. The elders sat in a circle, their faces grave. Chief Okeke stood and raised his staff. Mama Nwako, you have been accused of witchcraft and the murder of unborn children. Do you deny these charges? Mama Nwako smirked. Deny? No. I embrace them. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Even the elders, who had seen many evils in their time, recoiled at her brazenness. Then you know the punishment, the chief said grimly. The gods demand justice. Tommy stepped forward, her voice shaking. She must pay for what she has done. My children, my happiness, she stole them all. The villagers roared in agreement. Mama Nwako's face darkened as she realized the inevitable. Even the spirits she had served would not come to her aid now. As the trial continued, the verdict was clear. Mama Nwako, once respected, would face the fate of all witches, exile or death. The night of Mama Nwako's sentencing was unlike any other. The air was thick with tension. The flames of the bonfire casting long shadows on the faces of the villagers. Just as the chief prepared to pronounce her fate, an unnatural wind howled through the village. The ground trembled. The trees bent unnaturally, their leaves rustling in whispers. The spirits she had served were angry. Mama Nwako's eyes widened in fear. No, she whispered. Not yet. You dare challenge me? She hissed, her voice layered with a chilling echo. Yes, Tommy spat, standing firm. I know what you've been doing. You will not take another child from me. Chibuzo burst into the hut, holding a lit torch. The village must know the truth. Mama Nwako snarled, her body convulsing as she attempted to vanish. But something held her back. The blessed water had weakened her. For the first time, she was vulnerable. The battle was far from over, but the witch had been exposed. Tommy's scream tore through the night, waking the entire village. As the villagers emerged from their huts, holding lanterns and machetes, they were met with a chilling sight, Mama Nwako writhing on the ground. Her form shifting between human and something inhuman. The blessed water sizzled on her skin, revealing strange markings that glowed in the darkness. Iwu! What is this? A man cried, clutching his chest in fear. It is witchcraft. An elder spat. Mama Nwako is a witch. Nwako arrived, his face twisted in disbelief. No, this cannot be, he whispered, looking at his mother. Tell them, Mama. Tell them it's not true. But Mama Nwako remained silent, her red eyes darting from one villager to another. She had been caught, and there was no escape. The whispers turned into shouts, and the village chief was summoned. The people of Umuakwe had no mercy for witches. Bind her hands. The chief commanded. She must answer for her crimes. The villagers hesitated, fearful of touching her. But Chibuzo grabbed a rope and stepped forward. We cannot let her continue, she declared. She has stolen enough innocent lives. Mama Nwako let out a piercing laugh that sent chills through the crowd. Fools, she hissed. You think you have won? But she was bound, and the village prepared for her judgment. A piercing wail filled the air, and the fire flared violently. The villagers screamed as ghostly figures emerged from the smoke. Spirits of the unborn children. Their cries echoing through the night. Tommy fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the presence of the lost souls. My babies, she sobbed. They seek justice. The spirits swirled around Mama Nwako, their ethereal hands clawing at her. She shrieked as an unseen force pulled her toward the fire. No. I gave you what you asked for. I served you. But the spirits had no mercy. The village watched in horror as Mama Nwako was lifted into the air, her body contorting unnaturally. With one final, ear-piercing scream, she was engulfed in flames and vanished into the night. The village fell into stunned silence. The witch was gone, but the scars she had left behind would never fade. For days, the village remained in shock. Women held their children closer. Men whispered about the power of the spirits. And Tommy was left to mourn the children she had never held. Nwako was a broken man. He barely spoke, barely ate. He had lost his mother, but more than that, he had lost the illusion of the woman he thought she was. Tommy, however, was determined to heal. She visited Dibia Okonkwo once more. What now? She asked. Will I ever carry a child again? The old man smiled faintly. The curse is lifted, child. But healing takes time. You must give your spirit the chance to mend. And so, Tommy chose to live. 1 year later, Umuakwe had returned to normal. But the tale of the witch mother-in-law was passed down from generation to generation. Women whispered it to their daughters as a warning. And Tommy? She sat outside her hut, her hands resting gently on her growing belly. The warm sun bathed her in light, and for the first time in years, she felt peace. Nwako knelt beside her, placing a hand over her stomach. This time, he whispered, we will hold our child. Tommy smiled, hope shining in her eyes. The darkness was gone. The witch within was no more. And in its place, a new life had begun.